Welcome to this Learning Lab webinar, Changing the Aesthetic Benefits of Pollinator Gardens. Thank you all for joining us. We have an exciting lineup from our presenter to several congregations who will offer knowledge and their experience with designing, installing, and maintaining pollinator gardens. Before we begin, if you would like to join in a prayer of commitment, we are gathered here as people of faith in response to the calling of our hearts to come alongside the original stewards of this land and these waters that sustain us all. We seek to change the narrative of this story towards one of harmony with the gifts of creation and all living beings. We may act upon this calling in a way that helps us all, not only to heal the wounds of nature, but the wounds of our common story and living communities as well. Our hearts are full of hope as we come together with honor for all life. Thank you. And I have the pleasure of introducing our first presenter. I'm delighted to hand it over to Naomi. Naomi Edelson, our Senior Director of Wildlife Partnerships for the National Wildlife Federation. And she leads partnerships with state wildlife agencies and other state-based partners to secure funding that prevent wildlife from being endangered, including legislative, communications, grassroots, and coalition building elements of the campaign. You will also hear about our Sacred Grounds program, which she also coordinates with National Wildlife Federation. She's collaborator involving congregations to plant native plants on their grounds and home properties.
Okay, so Naomi, I'll stop sharing and then you can share your slides.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very, very much. It's so wonderful to have such a great crowd and to be working with Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake, which has been a long time partner in my work on sacred grounds. So I'm really, really thrilled for the opportunity, and there's such a great audience. And I maybe know one person from other work, Chris Eberly. I don't know if you're the same Chris, but if you are, hi, that I worked with on bird conservation. So
how are you, Naomi?
Hi, that's great. I was scanning to see for congregations, but I see you, which is excellent. So Chris and I are wildlife biologists and have done a lot of good conservation work together. So today I'm going to talk with you about sacred grounds and the simple idea of helping people and wildlife by planting native plants. It's always the hardest part, moving the first slide. I don't know why I can never do that. Sorry, hang on. Oh, Garden for Wildlife is National Wildlife Program's signature program where we do on the ground work. And we've been doing this since 1973. And it's really focused on where people live, work, play, learn, and what we're going to talk about tonight, worship. Sacred Grounds is very, as I said, very, very simple. Here's my son when he was 5 years old at my synagogue, Adat Shalom Reconstructionist congregation, and he's with some native plants. And we planted native plants at my congregation starting in 2012. Native plants are the plants that have grown up here, basically. They have evolved in a region and they thrive in our natural soils, our precipitation, our weather, and our climate. And the native plants and native wildlife rely on each other for survival. And I'll dig into that, no pun intended, in a minute. So the concept is very simple. In our region, which is in an era of climate change, there's a lot of focus on using native plants really to help slow the flow of our intense stormwater, of our intense rain that we're getting in this in this era into the Chesapeake Bay. And that's the whole point of the Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake, is to help our Chesapeake Bay survive. And it's in a lot of trouble. And this is one way we each can help with that. Now, here's a beautiful picture of the Anacostia River, one of the major rivers flowing into the Chesapeake Bay. And our public agencies at all levels, local, state, and federal, have done a lot to try to improve these streams going into the Anacostia and into the Potomac and into the Patuxent that go into the Chesapeake. And they have actually done a huge amount, and they have improved them. There used to be like 3 different kinds of fish in Sligo Creek, and now there's like 30, and it has room for even more improvement. And it's hard to believe, but we can actually really help those fish in that creek from what we do at our homes. And here's a picture of something we're all used to seeing, unfortunately, more and more. And this is what it looks like when that happens downstream. Like whatever we do where we live will end up somewhere else and bring a lot of things with it. And there's a web of life. What we do, we need the water, we need the wildlife, and they need us. It's all related. We've had a lot of trouble with wildlife. Many of you have heard about the decline of monarchs. They will be, I'm sure, listed as endangered, which means endangered of, and likely to go extinct, which is shocking. But also we've lost many birds since 1970, over 2.9 billion birds, individual birds like the meadowlark, which is also was once a common species. And there's many, there's 12,000 species that have been identified as species of greatest conservation need in all the state wildlife agencies. And part of the problem is we have usurped so much of the natural world that we really need to now build functioning habitat at our home. And I know we don't all have homes like this at all, but this is what we aspire to, many of us, to have these big, wide lawns. And it turns out those lawns are like concrete. They are like concrete for that stormwater. The water hits them, they have shallow roots that don't hold the water, and they don't trap the pollution, and they have no food for birds and butterflies. So if we can change the way we take care of our lawns, we can make a difference for people and wildlife. And one of the simple ways is that most, not all, but most native plants have longer and deeper and wider root systems to hold that water and slow the flow. When the water goes very fast, it brings with it everything and so much velocity that it scours the rivers and puts huge amounts of pollution in it at once. So if you can slow the flow with these better root systems, it really helps. And a lot of the stuff I'm going to show from now on is based on a professor in nearby Delaware, Dr. Doug Tallamy, who has really talked about this concept of bringing nature home. Many of us are used to going to parks, local or national, to have beautiful wildlife experiences, and that's great, but we can create our own park, is what he calls it, homegrown habitat right in our home. But so we know that plants are the foundation of any food web, and that includes even in urban, suburban, and rural systems. And what Dr. Tallamy says, we must raise the bar for what we ask our landscapes to do. We want them to support life. They can sequester carbon, they can support pollinators, and they can manage water. And it's a very simple concept, and wildlife needs 4 things to survive: food, water, cover, and places to raise young. And people often think when they feed birds, they're helping wildlife. And to some extent, maybe you're helping them, but the real time to help them is in the spring when they're feeding their young. And it turns out that birds rely on caterpillars to feed their young. And not only, and as an example, a chickadee needs in a 3-week period up to 9,000 caterpillars. Crazy, right? So they really need a lot of food. But you know what it's like when you have a teenager. I have a teenager, like they eat a lot. And these are little chicks in their nest, and they eat a lot at that stage. They're like at that point. And so if you really want to take care of the birds, you can really build a better bird feeder by planting these native plants, because it turns out that 90% of the insects, like those caterpillars, only eat specific plants that they've co-evolved with. And if those plants aren't in our landscape, like that big lawn, the bird food that they produce will not be there either. And here's, we have lots of, Doug telling me has lots of good data, like white oak, 233 caterpillars were found on it in one day, compared for a Bradford pear, which is commonly planted in tree in cities. Only one caterpillar of one species. And the same thing with flowering herbaceous plants. Goldenrod, I have it all over my yard now. Goldenrod and asters are like the super plants of herbaceous flowering plants. They support so many caterpillars. Oaks are one of the most important trees. If you want to plant a tree, and you can plant an oak, it turns out that at 534 different kinds of caterpillars live on oaks. And here's some of the top tree species. Huge numbers, really important. And you compare that with like a ginkgo, 1. And we know that these plants also are adapted to our local soils and our weather, and they will survive better without the use of intense management like our lawns. They don't need to be cut like that. They don't need to be fertilized. They don't usually need to be watered. And that really makes native plants better. They're better than the other kinds of plants that we've been trained to put in our yards, which are from other countries and are native in those countries and do great there, but they aren't going to help with our wildlife and our water here. And it turns out if we all do this, these small scale habitats together can make a big difference for people and wildlife. And some of us already plant them. Here's a dogwood tree. That's a native tree. People love them. Redbud, you know, there are many that you actually are familiar with. Black-eyed Susan. Here's an example of monarch butterfly feeding. If you put this in your yard, they'll come. Maybe they should. Here's some other beautiful, I mean, native plants are beautiful. I have that ironweed, the purple one in my yard. I have a lot of these in my yard. And here's some spring ones. They're beautiful. This ragwort, golden ragwort, is gorgeous. It's the first plant that comes up in the spring. I mean, they're really beautiful plants. They're just not the ones we've been taught to like. We've been taught before that this is how we pick our plants in our garden. You know, these are the kinds of things. But if you change that, we should really be looking at these other things on the other side of this seesaw. Those are the reasons we should be picking what we want in our yard. Look how much good we can do and how much we can care for creation by doing that. We have at National Wildlife Federation a native plant finder. You can put in your zip code. It'll tell you the best plants. I can send you that link. And if you wish, you can participate in a program that we have called Certified Wildlife Habitat and do all this and then get some recognition and be an ambassador and tell your friends and neighbors. So I'm going to end in 1 second. And I just want to say our Sacred Grounds program, was that my, was that my timer?
No, go ahead, Naomi.
Oh, all right, sorry. I thought that was, and so Sacred Grounds is about working with congregations to green their grounds and get their members, be an ambassador and get their members to inspire the members to do it at home. And we're working with 12 congregations in this region. And as I said, IPC is one of our partners, plus all of these other groups and more. And we're like at my synagogue, we planted 2,500 native plants and we did a lot. We had the families all come out. It was a great fun. We're working with a couple of churches in Anacostia that have put in an amazing, beautiful garden that people love. And we're working with several mosques in the region, and it's been a very community-oriented project, and everybody has really enjoyed it. So what I'm going to ask you to do is pledge right now yourself to plant native plants, and just go ahead and put it in the chat. Put your name and say, I pledge to plant native plants. And that's the project we're doing with IPC and other groups with congregations. We're getting them to pledge. We have a special website where people do it by their congregation and they set goals. And then we make it easy for people, and we host a Planting Hope native plant pickup day around Mother's Day, and people show up and they want these native plants and they plant them in their yards. And so I'll really end there. by, saying, a garden is a place we do reach for solace and for, being inspired to help care for the world. And here's our chance to give something back. And I'm just really pleased to be able to work with so many congregations to help take care of our rivers and streams. We do love them, and we can help them and our next generation. And I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Naomi. I really appreciate you taking the time to share and educate us all about how native plants benefit our sacred waters. It's wonderful. And
Okay, just give me a minute. I will share again.
And next we'll be hearing from Pastor Melanie Wells. Very excited to hear about her projects.
Yeah, give me 1 minute. And just bear with me, I'm trying to find my controls.
Pastor Melanie Wells is the founder of Ignite Development Network, who is able to secure funding through the Chesapeake Bay Trust and successfully complete projects on the grounds at Elevation Ministries, which she's a faith leader at, and I will let her take it away.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share more information about what we've done through the grant, the first grant that we received. If we could go back one slide, that would be really great. What I wanted to share first off was just this particular opportunity. Okay, what I'd like to share is that this particular opportunity came through partnerships. Ignite Development Network is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that focuses on providing opportunities for students in Baltimore County and Baltimore City to learn more about science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Through our grant with the Chesapeake Bay Trust, we actually had our Science Week focus on geoscience and environmental science in the summer of 2021. So our first partner was Elevation Ministries, and my connection with this project is both as the founder of Ignite Development Network and as the pastor with my husband, Michael Wells of Elevation Ministries. So our church served as the location where we actually planted the garden and where the summer program was held for those students. We actually received an outreach and restoration mini grant that helped us to support this objective. And one of the things I wanted to share about this is if you're considering applying for a mini grant, it's really important for you to speak with the project director ahead of time. And that allowed us to connect with the other two partners who helped us on this project, who were Blue Water Baltimore and then Interfaith Partners of the Chesapeake. And we wouldn't have known about the work that they were doing in Baltimore if we had not had that conversation with our project director. So in April of 2021, we submitted our application for the program that actually began in July. And the goals of our program were to increase the knowledge of underrepresented minority participants regarding geoscience, environmental science, and the Baltimore waterways, to increase the knowledge of volunteers regarding the importance of our waterways, to increase community engagement in environmental protection efforts, and to improve the natural resources and enhance the aesthetic of the Halthorpe community where our church is located. If you could move to the next slide, please. So this slide actually shows the actual grounds where our gardens were planted. So on the side of our building, there was a small strip where we installed gardens. And then the major part of our garden was the area in the front space. So total, we had 327 square feet. And the image that's in the top left corner is actually where we had members from the Blue Water Baltimore staff come out and work with our students who were in our summer program. They explained to them the importance of a pollinator garden, and they designed the gardens that we would install later in the program with the students on July 10th of last year. Next slide, please. So this is an image of all of the activity that actually occurred on August 14th of last year. So at the conclusion of our program with our summer students, we actually had 2 activities going on at the same time. Our students were involved in planting the garden. In addition, we had volunteers who helped us do a trash cleanup of the area around the church. And I just wanted to note that volunteers made a tremendous difference for the work that we did. And so it was members from the congregation of Elevation Ministries, parents of the students who were participating in Ignite Summer Program, Hope Academy, volunteers. Thank you to Bonnie with Interfaith Partners. She was able to share information and get members from other congregations to come out and volunteer to help us plant the garden and clean, as well as a homeowners association, Villages of Violetville, which is located about 10 minutes from our church. They came out as well and helped us on that day. If we could move to the next slide, please. So this actually shows images of planting the garden. So prior to the day of the plant, we had to clear out all of the plants that were previously planted there. We worked with Blue Water Baltimore to develop the plant list. Some of the plants that we planted were summer sweets, wood asters, small penstemons, Joe pie weed, butterfly weed, purple coneflower, excuse me. So those are the flowers that are in the front garden and the side garden. And you can see through the images, just kind of the progress that we made through the day. And so it was very rewarding for both our students and our volunteers to participate in the transformation of our space. One of the things that was really great from the help that we received both from Bonnie and Blue Water Baltimore is just the maintenance schedule. Because we not planted a native garden before, we weren't really sure what it would look like once it started growing. So we are now still working with Blue Water Baltimore and Interfaith Partners of the Chesapeake as we maintain it for the first year, because we don't want to unintentionally rip out some of our native plants that we planted because they look different than the plants that we're used to seeing. And I believe that is the last slide in my presentation. But the one thing I would like to say is just thank you for all of the partners who helped us. We learned a lot as a congregation, and that actually led our church, Elevation Ministries, to applying for another grant this year from the Chesapeake Bay Trust that we were also awarded to do, just to provide additional education about our waterways to our community in general. Thank you so much for your time today and the opportunity to present on our project, Hope for a Healthy Tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Pastor Melanie, for sharing all of your knowledge and experience with your congregation. I really enjoyed hearing you break down the, intricate partnerships that everyone played a role in. It's wonderful to hear how you're educating others about how to be good stewards of the land and water. And as you can see, we have another speaker, and Adrienne Knight is from Knox Presbyterian Church, and I will let her take it away.
Hi, greetings. I live in Bowie, but my home is Knox Presbyterian Church in Baltimore City. It's about 5 to 10 minutes from Johns Hopkins Hospital, so we are in the Oliver community. And I too would like to just start with this verse. And then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the labors are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send laborers into the harvest. The reason I say that, because even though I see Melanie had lots of help, but on my end, after we planted the garden, we did get some help, some volunteers, but we need some more laborers. And so that's why I'm using that verse. So if you're thinking about planting, make sure you have your staff and who's going to come to help you with this garden. Because sometimes when you're a lone ranger, it becomes your garden. So make sure you have some people that are going to be dedicated to this garden. Okay, what's the next slide? All right, this is our layout for our garden. We planted, we started back in 2019 with this layout of what it should look like. And by 2020, when it was time to plant, of course, we all know what happened. We had COVID-19. So we put this on hold. We kept our diagrams. We kept showing each other. So I call this our paint by numbers. So when I talked to the congregation, I said, okay, it'll be like paint by numbers. So you'll get your color. So when I showed the diagram to the congregation, they were picking out the colors that they like. So that helped us to put some of the plants down. We have, does the next slide show the others? Okay, so this shows us how it started with all the grass up front, just an eyesore of what of grass. So we decided, okay, as you can see on the far wall, it's a mural. The mural is called the Garden of Eden.
That's great.
So we wanted to have a 3D image from the mural to the end of the parking lot. And that's where our pollinator garden went in. And on the other side, you could, okay. On the other side, you see the before, after, and during of trying to level it out and get it ready for the native plants. So it was about 2 days of this process before the garden was ready to go in. Okay, to next slide. And in the Oliver community, we do not find a lot of native plants and gardens. So this was what we struck out on to bring some new life into the neighborhood on our church ground and just for the people across the street. So they can sit out on their front and look at our flowers across the street. And I put this little heart there because the heart of our garden. And this year, this was there. And I kept looking at it and I said, that looks like a heart. So it's called the heart of our garden. So in May of 2021, we had a big campaign of planting. And we had a church out from Annapolis to come and help us put our garden in, some young people from our own church. And after we planted the native garden, the bees and the butterflies start coming. So you don't have to have a lot of flowers or all over, but once you put them in there, the bees are bound to find it. Okay, next slide. And it's all, I had to put this one in there, but because sometimes I feel like I'm the little red hen, or we feel the ones that are helping out. Because sometimes we at the end of the summer, if you know the book, the weed is growing, the flowers are pretty. Can you come and help me? I'm too busy. Can you come and help me? I'm too busy. But when it's all in, oh, that's a nice garden. Now our garden really looks nice. So I use this story, The Little Red Hen. Sometimes we have to do it ourselves or call in a few friends to come and help us. But at the end, we know that it's not about us. It's about how God has blessed us with the native plants and the bees and the butterflies coming to see us. But sometimes I do feel like the little red hen, that no one wants to help, but I know what happens at the end.
Thank you so much for
sharing. We did receive a grant from the Chesapeake Bay Trust to put in our garden. And thanks to Bonnie. And if you're my tip for that, if you're applying for the Chesapeake Bay Trust, get a team. Try not to do it by yourself, because Bonnie and I work tirelessly together, but get a team, divide the questions up, put them all together, and then submit your application if you can. If you don't have a grant writer, at least get a team together to take on the questions one by one. I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrienne. Yes, I really appreciate that last bit of very helpful advice. And as everyone heard, their congregation needs support with the care of the garden, as many congregations find having a green team helps with that maintenance of the project. So thank you so much for sharing. And we have our final speaker, very excited to hear from Emily Pierce. She's a senior warden at Christ Episcopal Church and was the inspiration behind an amazing pollinator project that involves the parish members and students.
Thank you for the introduction, Sarah. It's wonderful to be here tonight. I'm just going to say that one thing that makes me very excited is that I think I only know about 2 of the 54 people on this call. And it's always such a pleasure to meet new friends and to feel like I'm part of a bigger movement. So I feel very inspired to be here with everybody tonight. As Sarah said, I am the senior warden over at Christ Episcopal Church in Rockville, Maryland. Our church is also home to Christ Episcopal School, which is a preschool through 8th grade program that right now has about 120 students. And so we have 2 communities that live on one campus together and share resources. And I want to talk about our gardens as a spiritual practice, both for community building and creation care. And within that, as a place for prayer and meditation and the creation of shared goals. So coming into the Pollinator Garden project, it was around the time that our school and our church were having some significant conflict due to lack of resources. And I think, as you all know, when resources get scarce, it's pretty common for human beings to start fighting. And so we've been having a lot of conflict in our system. And it was also around the time that COVID hit. And so we had some double whammies that were hitting our communities. And I decided, and you can advance to the next slide, that it would be an interesting thing to see if we could take a little tiny slip of land that fell between a sidewalk and a basketball course on our campus and turn it into a community garden that would be a project that combined the resources of both the school and the church, volunteers from both the school and the church, and an initiative to try to support the goals of both the school and the church. We have an environmental care team. That's Mark Wright that you see in a picture. He's been a long time interfaith partners to the Chesapeake, volunteer and friend. And he helped on the church side of things to get things started. And we also partnered with the 3rd grade class at the school. And so you can see these are mostly before pictures where we had just this grassy area, and similar to the other speakers, you know, there was some preparation work involved that we decided to get our adult volunteers to do before we encouraged the kids to do anything, because we wanted the soil to be ready for them to enjoy the process of planting plants and not have to do the grunt work of removing the rocks from the soil and preparing it with the leaf grow and things to help them create a good start for all the plants. So we did all that work beforehand using volunteers from the church as well as parents from the school. We had a Saturday morning community work day to do it. And as you can see, the area we're working on is adjacent to some playgrounds. And so it was a fun way for families to come out, and the younger kids could play while the rest of us did some heavy lifting. So if you want to go to the next slide. So you'll see Anna Owimbo in this slide. Thank you so much, Anna, for your assistance on this. Anna's daughter attended our school, and so she is a community member, always will be, and she really jumped on board with this project and was part of that behind the scenes team that got everything prepped and ready for the kids to work on. In the upper left, you also see the third grade class, sort of in the process of having planted their part of the garden. And in the bottom left, some of our adult volunteers from the church. So I think probably many of you have the experience that a lot of garden volunteers tend to be master gardeners or older members of the congregation who've been working in the gardens a long time, and they have a really wonderful eye for design and a very deep knowledge of the plants, but they may not necessarily be the best partners for working with novice gardeners or with children. And so that was the case that we had too. So I came on board along with our master gardener to teach the third grade class how to plant the plants. And we had such a fun experience together. But I need to share some stories about it because it wasn't always rosy. When we all gathered to do the planting, the third grade class was really excited to be outside. And so it took them a while to calm down and listen to the instructions. And my master gardener partner had laid out everything very carefully and had some ideas about exactly where the plants needed to go to fulfill her design goals. And the students were just so excited to get in there and start planting that it was hard for them to restrain themselves to her design ideas and also to her instructions about the process and how the plants should go in and then the mulch should go on and then the water should go on. So after we had explained very carefully exactly the structure that we wanted them to follow, and we told them to to go do their thing, it just became kind of a wild gardening party where there was watering happening and mulching happening and planting happening kind of all at the same time and all in different places. And my master gardener friend was getting visibly nervous about the changes that were happening from what she planned. And I was running around trying to be the positive comedic voice, trying to keep everything light. And so we had all of this energy going on. And we taught the kids about the plants we were planting and why a pollinator garden was important. And as they were planting the plants, one child started shrieking and said, "There's a bee on my plant." And and so we had to take a pause and reevaluate our connection with nature and why we were planting the pollinator garden and the fact that the bee was supposed to be there. So it was a wild and crazy process. By the time it was over, I think everybody was exhausted and very proud of our work. And I had the surprising experience to go home that night and find this lovely email from our master gardener saying how much she loved that experience of working with the children and how special it had been to her, which is something that I did not expect, given how frustrated I could tell she was initially with her plans being upended by these young novice gardeners. But it was clearly an incredibly meaningful project for everybody. And I think if you advance again, Sarah, you can see how things are a year later, and now it's even much more developed than this, but the plants really took off. The spot has been great for them. The kids at the school still feel a sense of ownership over this garden, and they're still involved in the maintenance of it. We also have a summer team that comes in and does maintenance, and Anna has been part of that. We have a year-round preschool, so there are always people on campus, and we have a summer camp as well. So that does help with it. But I just wanted to point out the role of this garden, just to try to really hit home how special this is, because this has been a place for our community of both building hope and processing grief. This was one of the few places that we could continue to gather as a community during COVID and do service together and planting together. And so with each plant that we planted and with every design we did for this garden, it was like we were showing our faith in our future together. And we were building a home for all of us, a spiritual home for all of us, a place of beauty for all of us, and also a place that really showed our devotion to our place in the ecosystem and the importance of the natural world, both to our school curriculum and to our church's faith-based practices. So we are a certified wildlife habitat, and we are hoping to become part of the Sacred Grounds program as well. We have a pollinator garden that is adjacent to our school building that's not pictured here, as well as a shade-based pollinator and native plant garden in our columbarium. And next on our list is to develop a green space that is adjacent to the garden pictured here, which is a memorial garden to a woman named Linda Foley, actually a girl named Linda Foley, who unfortunately was killed in a car accident in her girlhood. And she, this was in the 1970s, she was the daughter of a family who attended the church, and she also was a graduate of our school. And so our hope is to redevelop this memorial garden, which is currently quite overgrown, and you can barely see the plaque to Linda anymore. We'd like to redevelop that as a sacred space, as a memorial garden, and have it be another joint school and church community project to honor a family that was part of both of those communities. So I'm very excited about that upcoming goal. And I just wanted to say that overall, we've really learned the trade-offs with these projects have a lot to do with changing your perspective on aesthetics. You know, a lot of people are used to institutional organizations having gardens that are look very controlled and orderly. And when you plant native plants, or when you're planting for wildlife, that tends not to be the result that you get. And so there's been some adjustment on that. We also, for the first time this year, went completely pesticide free on our campuses. And that has meant a lot of what I call sort of volunteer plants showing up in places where they didn't used to. And so that's taken some adjusting as well to get used to seeing, which you see in this picture, the sort of the green coming up in the sidewalk where it's not intentionally planted to be, and trying to decide, you know, how much of that are we okay with, and how much of that do we really need to actively be weeding. And so that's been part of it. It's been a back and forth in terms of our relationship to insects. I mentioned the bees story. Another issue we have on our campus are mosquitoes. And so Mosquito Joe used to be applied to our campus to try to control the mosquitoes, particularly for the preschool kids. Their playground was a place where they would get mosquito bites. And so we've been having to adjust our expectations about insects and our relationship to insects. And I think that behind all of it, which I think everybody on this call probably knows, is this deeper investigation of the human relationship with nature, and what is our place in nature, and what is our duty towards nature. What should our expectations be about our place in the ecosystem? And so we're just beginning to have those types of conversations as a community, and really looking forward to implementing more nature-based education programming into our school curriculum. So I'm hoping you will see more from us in the future. And I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you again, Emily, for sharing that wonderful story. And I really appreciate the faith in the future, because that is what planning really is about. Thank you for sharing. And now we are at the questions and answers part of this webinar. And please feel free. We have the chat open. Any questions regarding any of the speakers that you heard, our presenter?
Sarah, there are some questions in the chat.
Oh, let me just open that. I'm missing that. Okay, I do see. All right, from Janet, what is the best way to transform lawn to garden? Okay, that is an excellent question. And I feel like Naomi might be the best person if she's still with us. I'm just checking.
Yeah, I'm here. I think we saw some very good examples. It's very impressive what the congregations have done. And I can tell you that, that there's a lot of different methods. You do have to kill the lawn. And as some people know, there's many different ways to do. There are some different ways. There's a great book. Actually, I should have brought it, by Catherine Zimmerman, which we're giving to the Sacred Grounds congregations. But there's several techniques. You have to remove, you can kill the sod by, which Osei Shalom, who's on the webinar, is doing by putting, what do you call it? Cardboard and newspaper and then wood chips, and you basically smother it, and then you can wait 6 months or something. You can just remove the sod by having a sod remover, something you can borrow, rent from like a tool place. And then you can also put a bunch of pile of wood chips on, which has, there's pros and cons of everything. But I would recommend, like one of the congregation shows, starting small. 300 square feet is plenty to start with, because it does take some time to learn to maintain it. And, but, and then you can, there's some design, some of the designs people showed were great. There's also on some of these municipal websites like Rainscapes for Montgomery County, they have some sample designs, and you start with something very simple, 5 or 6 different kinds of plants. Don't make it complicated. And, you see what happens, and you take care of it for a couple of years, and then you shouldn't have to do much to help it. But the native plants are available. I have a list of of many of the area nurseries, and IPC has the same information. I'm happy to share it with you for later, but it's a process. I would start with a small section and then grow it. And like was last said, you want to get your members acquainted with the different look. But my yard right now with those goldenrod and asters is buzzing with life. I mean, it is alive, and those bees don't sting. They're not the stinging kind. The stingers are most of them are the not native ones, and they're the, what do you call them, yellow jackets, but these are not the stinging ones. So it's great. You will be happy. But it does take some effort in the beginning.
Yeah, thanks, Naomi. I can see one more question here. Is full sun a requirement, or is partial shade okay for the pollinator garden?
Yeah, there's examples of sun and shade, lots of examples of each. And so you can have shade or sun or part. But don't forget trees. Like we're showing all these gardens, but trees, if you can put trees on your grounds at home or wherever, that will have the biggest impact for water and wildlife. But that's something to consider. And to know which kinds of plants are native, I would say again, there's this native plant finder that National Wildlife Federation has. It's nwf.org/native plant finder, but that will tell you put in your zip code. But there's lists around there's a list the Fish and Wildlife Service puts out, and I don't know if Sarah, if you follow up with resources, but there's a lot of resources and lists of native plants in the area, and I'm happy to provide a list also for the Mid-Atlantic. I mean, it's not like my zip code and your zip code are going to have the same plants. If you lived over in the western part of the state or parts of the Eastern Shore where the soil starts changing, you might have different plants than like where I live in Tacoma Park.
Thank you for answering those questions, Naomi. And thank you, Anna, for putting in the link. And I think we've answered all the questions in the chat. If anyone else has anything else on their mind.
Charlie's
go ahead,
raising his hand.
You can unmute yourself, Charlie.
I thank you. I'm impressed. I'll tell you, I will sleep good tonight and work harder tomorrow. But thank you for all you're doing. I'll tell you, it's people don't realize the amount of work that's being done to make Mother Earth more protective and us more healthy for working outside. But I have a question. And we were talking about planting trees, and that's what we do. The Gunpowder Valley Conservancy plants trees, but one of the problems there is I have so much shade on my property that I'm having my flowering plants a problem. But the question that I had, and it's something that we have not brought up yet at Chesapeake Presbyterian Church, is how do you make planting these gardens that you put in at your churches contagious? And when I use that word contagious, I'm wondering if people don't think more about, gee whiz, I could put that in my home. Do you have has anybody done that and had any success or any challenges? No?
So I can speak to this. This is Melanie with Ignite Development Network and Elevation Ministries. One of the things that we've done to move in that direction is this year, we received our second award, and we actually signed the pledge with Interfaith Partners of the Chesapeake. And so we're now working to develop a green team and actually help our congregation understand the value of the work that we're doing. Because as I believe Ms. Knox said in her experience, oftentimes once you initially plant the garden, it's just a few people and everyone else admires the beauty, but they have no idea what really goes into it, what does it mean, and nor the fact that they could do it at their own personal homes. So what our congregation and my husband and I, as the leaders of our church, have made a commitment to do is that this won't be a one garden and done, but we will find ways each year to continue to expand what we started in 2021.
Thank you. That's good.
Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks for, I was thinking about that too, that, if you need extra hands on deck, always, you want a team that you can rely on. And if any of you, I think many of you have already attended our Faithful Green Leaders training, but if not, the next one will be held in October. And I'm just going to pop the link in the chat where you can register. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I have a comment. This is Adrienne Knight. For those we did have an adoption agency on our plants that might encourage some others to join in. I've got some tags, and if you
Adrienne, I think we're having trouble hearing you. Could you just start again from the beginning? Let's see if it gets any better.
This is just a tip that might help out. I gave out, it was like an adoption that would adopt one of the plants, put your name on it. You have to take care of it to see maybe that would inspire to go further if they are in charge of that plant. Or when you come by, I know some members are coming by and saying, that's my tree, because they remember planting it in a certain location. So some of them have tags, but over the years, the tags are gone, but they can kind of tell where their plant is, if it's up against a wall. But I think having the tags on there with their name might be encouraging.
Adrienne, I'm going to try and repeat what you just said. I think what she's recommending is that tagging of the plants or tagging trees is usually a powerful incentive to get people to participate. Thanks, Adrienne. Okay, so we have 3 minutes. So any other questions? And I'm going to just post the evaluation in here just for all of those who won't be staying on for the after webinar gathering. So
hi, this is Bonnie. Hi, everybody. Two things. I also posted in the chat where you can sign the pledge that Pastor Melanie was talking about. The more folks sign the pledge, it's a great way to make this commitment. And just want to go back. I had also put in the chat. We've talked about possibly starting an interfaith gardening group where we would go, week to week. You say, come garden, help us weed at my congregation this week, and then next week we're going to go as an interfaith group to garden to help at another garden. So just find that there's great strength and community, and this is how we can meet other people of faith that are doing similar work. And from what I hear from my beloved plant people is that it's more fun to garden with other people. So keep it in mind, and I'd love to talk with folks that are interested in doing something like that.
I think that's an excellent idea. I just want to add, we didn't really talk about it, but many of the local jurisdictions have grants. And like my congregation, you can, Montgomery County now has a grant to do this up to $20,000. So separate from those mini grants that were the outreach grants that were mentioned, Prince George's has it, Washington, D.C. I don't know why Virginia doesn't, but I don't think they do that I know of. But this is Howard County has something a little bit. This is animal, it's growing, and we're the leader in the nation for having these programs, but there are in other parts of the country. But you should learn or ask your city or municipality to start one, because it really helps them with stormwater runoff, and they have a big problem. So if you start demanding it, you might get it, and then you can get significant resources to help you do this.
And Anne Arundel has a Unity Garden grant as well for $1,000.
It's a big problem. Stormwater is only going to get worse in our area with climate change, and we really can together make a difference. So it's good that they're beginning to provide some funding. And thank you. I really appreciate it being on. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you all for joining us on this learning lab. We hope it has inspired you to go forth and do likewise. And we want to wish everyone blessings of health, safety, and well-being to you, your mind, body, and spirit.
Are we doing the breakout rooms?
Yes, we will be doing that after we close with the prayer, and then invite for the first focus group. Thank you, Bonnie.
And this is people will start dropping off. So
thank you. Thank you for noting that to me. I will say a very short, sweet prayer. This is from the Chinook tribe. They're the original inhabitants of the Pacific Northwest coast, and it really just rang out to me. It's may all I say and all I think be in harmony with thee, God within me, God beyond me, maker of the trees.